Welcome to the only place where real, raw, and vulnerable conversations happen with IFBB Bikini Pros to give you an inside look at their struggles, strategies, mindset, passions, and all of life beyond the stage. This podcast is made to inspire, motivate, and remind competitors and the average gym goer that even the most extreme lifestyles and elite athletes have their ups and downs. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I'm your host, Celeste Rains-Turk, and now it's time for the Confessions of a Bikini Pro podcast. Today we'll be speaking with a vegan athlete who started competing in 2017 and became a pro 6 months later with 2 bikini overalls under her belt at North Americans. She then went on to compete in 8 pro shows in her rookie season, always placing within the top 10, which is super impressive. And when she was focusing on becoming an Olympian, she ended up becoming pregnant and has spent some time away from the stage, focusing on motherhood with aspirations to step on stage again with her baby girl cheering her on. So I'm very happy to welcome to the show, Bree Wigley. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you for having me. And that was an amazing introduction. I feel like a superstar.
You are. I'm so happy you're here and finally to have you on. And I always like to kick things off by asking if there's anything that you would do or think about right before your heel would hit the stage.
Ooh, I would think about it's funny, but I kind of like channel Beyonce. I'm like, got this, like, go and cut up and shine. I always like tell myself, like, shine your light, so I kind of channel my Beyonce because she's just always so just smooth up there when she's performing. So it's really a performance.
Yeah. Oh, that's so true. Have you always done that from your very first show?
Yes. And it actually dates back to kind of like my childhood in cheerleading and dance. My mom actually brought up the other day, she was like, I remember, you were always kind of like the one in the front, because I would make all the dramatic faces, do all the, the fun, cute faces that you see cheerleaders do. And like, it really just kind of stuck with my personality. So I'm not like licking my tongue out now on stage or, blowing kisses now, but it's kind of the same thing, giving like that cute, confident, not overly seductive because it's not my personality, but like the smirk, the smile, the, like just kind of showing your personality, my personality and my routine. So that's always kind of just been who I am since childhood.
That's awesome. I love that. So you're comfortable on stage.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you becoming pregnant after doing so many shows, and you were wanting to qualify for the Olympia at the time. Was this another goal of yours?
Absolutely. So my husband, I kind of hit that circuit of shows like back to back because my husband was deployed and I had a lot of free time on my hands. So I was like, I'm gonna just stay focused, keep my head down, help time pass by. I'm gonna get on the road and do these shows. So I traveled a lot by myself to shows, which was different because I was used to kind of having him there to get the rental car and check us in the hotel and carry my bag. So that was just a whole different experience doing those shows without his support. And when he came back after a year, we just got super excited and I kind of just lost sight. I knew we had already, like, a lot of shows were canceled because COVID had just kind of ramped up. So they had like started canceling shows and I was like, dang, one show after another just kept getting canceled for me. And I was like, this is something that we decided as, a couple that we wanted to start a family. So, I don't want to keep putting it off. The stage, I always said, will always be there. I'm 27 and at the time I was 25. So I was like, I still have a good stretch of time to get back out there, even if it's in a year or 2 or 3 years. So it was something that we planned for sure. And it just happened so fast. I was like, oh, wait, okay, we're pregnant. This is happening. So
wow. Yeah. That's so cool. What a blessing.
Absolutely. I'm so thankful and honored to, experience it.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing. And I'm glad you brought up how you saw competing as something that would always be there, because I think that's a challenge some people have, is like accepting that you can take time away from the stage to prioritize other life things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I would love to hear what you would want other competitors to know about fostering other parts of their life in addition to competing and healthy living, even if it means putting some of those goals on hold.
Absolutely. So some of the, life principles and traits that I've learned through competing and prep, those transpire into so many other areas of my life, even motherhood. Like I'm like meal prepping her food and like, putting things in her little cute containers too. So it's just like a lot of those things that I've learned through prep, the discipline, focusing on your goal and, being diligent. That's one thing in competing in prep, you really have to focus on. Like you're going to be doing pretty much the same thing for a window of time in your life. So, you have to, be driven to stick with your morning AM cardio, driven to stick with your heavy lifts, focusing on what you eat, when you eat it. So all of that, is really transpired into motherhood. And I think that it's good for other competitors to see that, hey, like even when I'm going back to school for maybe a degree or something, I can still use some of the things that I learned in bodybuilding, to help get me through different life events.
So true. Oh, I know. I love that. I love that so much because I feel like bodybuilding's taught me so much patience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that can apply anywhere. And it's like allowed me to learn how to flex my discipline muscle in a more productive way, rather than like a disordered or out of focus way. Mm-hmm. So I really love that advice and the way that you brought that up and you're applying it to other goals rather than seeing as new goals or new circumstances as if they were impeding on your life. You're seeing your life as a way to enhance those new areas.
Absolutely. It's just so many things, like the list goes on and on. I always looked at competing as like a compound, interest, like day after day, like you're chipping away at your, physique. And the same thing with life, like day after day, do that one thing that's going to contribute to your success, whatever your goal is. So, like I said, it's so many things. And I know you definitely get it.
Yeah, I understand. And I definitely, I would love to be a mom one day, but not there yet. So I was like really excited to talk to you and get your insight, especially because we do have, a lot of competitors out there who worry about their body image already. And then it seems to get heightened. Like I've had clients who have become pregnant, or I've had clients who express to me that they want to, but they're worried about how it will affect their body. And you had posted, I think it was early last year, that you had some worries about being able to come back after becoming a mom and giving birth, but then you had this realization that pregnancy was going to be the most important thing you ever did, and you'd confidently bear any pain or scars from going through this experience. So how do you feel now that it's been a few years since you stepped on stage?
Yeah, so you gave me chills when you just kind of like replayed. It's like I said that, and I'm like, yes, I totally said that, because that's how I feel now. Of course, in a sport where your body or your physique is what's judged, like let's just be honest, like that's what it's all about. It is easy to be like a little bit hyper concerned or sensitive about it, like, oh my God, what if my glutes don't go back right, or what if I do have stretch marks on my tummy. But I think what's important, like I said, like for me bearing a child is the number one, like my number one accomplishment at the top of my list. So it's just like, regardless of what happens, like I'm still going to be confident and strong. And if this sport really is something that I love to do, I won't let it make or break my view of myself or my self-confidence. So it was just kind of an epiphany that I had, like after I had my daughter. I was like maybe 2 months postpartum, and I'm like, oh my God, I'm not seeing any abs, and I know I've been eating clean, but it's just like, that's silly of me to think that my body would like go back to, what it was before, when I did something magical, like I brought an entire another human into this world, like a portal. So it's like, I would be silly to think that like, I'm just going to be like shredded after 2 months. Whereas, maybe on prep after spending month after month, that would be the case. So I did have to get that out of my mind and just kind of embrace who I was, or who I am now as a mom. And I like to think to myself, like, I'm like, oh, I want to get back to, how I was. But it's like, no, I want to be stronger and better than how I was. Like now I'm like, if I'm working out, sometimes I'll like take my daughter Camille outside with me, and I'm like doing my squats and stuff. And I'm like, she's kind of heavy. Like she's almost heavier than weights, but it's like, it's super important that I don't drop her and that, I keep my form right. So it's just like, I'm way stronger even before I had, I buried a child. So I think that was it was a big turning point for me, my pregnancy and just postpartum, and seeing, like, hey, I'm not gonna, have abs 2 months after a little human stretched my body, 40 plus pounds, so.
Yes, that is exactly right. I feel like that's such a great example of how people can have really high, like people will say my confidence is not where I want it to be. Mm-hmm. And then if you really step back, what's happening is their expectations are unfair. Mm-hmm. And that's what's impeding on their confidence. And I think you had this moment, or it sounds like you had this moment where you're like, can I just celebrate my body? Like, can we really appreciate what she's just done and brought to the world, and embrace, you use that word. And I just think that's such a powerful takeaway, or a powerful key point in this, is celebrate your body and enjoy that. And rather than looking back and wishing to be there, focus on what's now possible because of what you've experienced.
Oh my gosh, girl, you are on point. Like, you are preaching.
I'm summarizing what you're saying.
You get me. You totally get me. Yes, 100%.
Well, I'm glad that we're on the same page. It's so nice to just connect so easily with you, by the way. I'm experiencing that, and it's really cool.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about pregnancy. You had to, of course, prioritize your health during pregnancy. I noticed you had worked out through your pregnancy. You shared a lot of workouts, and they were unique, not something that you'd see on a normal day-to-day basis a bikini competitor do. So how did you decide or know what would be best for you through different trimesters?
So starting out, that first trimester, I was a hot mess. Like my body was just weird because it was transforming, and I didn't really understand. At the moment I didn't understand what was happening. I'm like, oh, okay, I'll just have a belly bump. But it's like, no, your hips start to ache, your lower tailbone. I had morning sickness. So that first trimester, those first 12 weeks were oh my God, it was horrible. So I personally, my husband would try to encourage me, hey, you should get up off the couch. And I'm like, you don't understand. Get away from me. I'm acting strange because my hormones are out of whack. So after that, I was longing to work out that first trimester, but just physically I couldn't. And even it was getting to the point where mentally I was like, oh my gosh, if I even squat, I'm gonna barf. It was just that bad. So magically and thankfully, because I know a lot of women don't experience have morning sickness and then it kind of goes away. A lot of women can have it throughout the entire pregnancy. So at 13 weeks, it's the switch flipped, and I was feeling amazing. I was like, oh, okay. I felt so much better. The morning sickness went away. Some smells I still couldn't tolerate, but I was like, okay, I think I can do this. I can walk. I'm like, let's lace these shoes. I'm gonna go for a walk in my neighborhood. So then I started to walk, and then I'm like, okay, but I'm achy, my hips and stuff. Because the way your uterus is expanding is just very, very different, and I have a kind of narrow body, so I would have all of these weird pains and aches. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna try yoga, which is something that I didn't do a lot of when I'm in prep. It's cardio, weights, recovery, rest, whatever. So I'm like, I'm gonna do yoga. kind of stretch my hips out. Now I'm gonna do yoga, and then I'm like, but yoga's a little too slow. So let me do a little Pilates as well, because Pilates will be a little bit more challenging. So I did both, actually. And then as I continued to progress from trimester to trimester, by the third trimester, I was like, okay, like, let me get a little bit of cardio in. I didn't feel comfortable jumping, just because my belly, it was like, okay, this is a lot. And then for me, my breasts kind of exploded. They just got like huge. It's just kind of how some people's bodies work, some women's bodies, respond. So I'm like, I can't really jump. So I wanted to do like burpees and star jumps and jumping jacks and all kind of stuff, but I just could not do that kind of stuff. So I had to do what my body was capable of, and still be productive, and to do what was best to kind of help my body prepare for birth, because at that point I'm like in the third trimester and I'm like, I want to have a natural birth, a natural vaginal birth. And we ended up having a successful water birth. It was a beautiful experience. It was almost seamless. I'm like, oh, so that's why I did like all those deep, squats, and I made sure that my hips were and everything were like flexible, and I learned how to breathe, how to do Kegels and all those things that come with pregnancy. That was just so different, because in bodybuilding, I'm used to like hearing about, like HIIT cardio and different things like that. So it's like, I'm having to do a lot more fitness and conditioning, but in a different ways, to ensure that, baby was safe, I was safe, and we had a safe delivery. So I know that was long-winded, but
no, that was awesome. Oh my gosh, that was so insightful. And I just love the perspective. Like, you're right. There's so many times in bodybuilding, we're just focused on the lifting and the cardio and and then nutrition, right? And then posing. Right. And it's like, well, that ate up all my time, so maybe I'll do. And I'm not saying everybody does this, but sometimes I'll be guilty of like, well, 5 minutes of stretching post-workout will do after my excessively long day of exercise. Right. But it's like you were put in a position where you really were listening to your body and you had new goals and you honored that, rather than maybe you experienced this, I should ask rather than assume. Did you ever judge yourself for like getting cravings or having aversions to food, or for needing to change how you worked out?
So initially I was a little bit concerned, because I'm like, I have become so accustomed to, eating some of my staple items in my diet, especially being vegan. I'm like, this is what I like. This is how I like it, but I just couldn't tolerate it. I'll tell you, I loved oatmeal. Like, that's a staple in most bodybuilders' diet. I loved oatmeal during prep. Literally, the thought of oatmeal just made me want to barf. Like, it was that bad. So I was like, what the heck what's wrong with me? Like, that's one of my favorite things to do. So I had to find something that, I could tolerate for breakfast that was nutritional for baby, for me. So I was a little bit down about that, but then I started to think like, okay, I'm eating for 2. So let me continue to, get those key foods in. I had a lot of options, being plant-based. So I'm like, let me continue to focus on, making sure I'm getting enough fats, healthy fats via plant-based supplements, via plant-based foods. So I did beat myself up initially about it, but it's kind of like things started to click the longer I was pregnant. Like, look, this is what's happening right now in this season of your life. Here's how you need to adjust to it. And here's how you need to be, change your mentality towards it. Like, you're doing something phenomenal. You're doing something just as extraordinary as, competing. So once I embraced that, my journey, pregnancy was just like, okay, this is cool. And now I'm even like you get the itch to go back to the stage. I'm like, oh my gosh, I think I want to be pregnant again.
I was just gonna ask you that.
Well, you're the only person I really like told that to, and of course all your listeners when they hear this.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, me and thousands of others.
But yes, absolutely. So like I said, at first I was a little bit like, oh my gosh, like, this is so not what I usually do, but my body was doing something it had never done before. I've never bared a child, so that was a thing for me. And then with the workouts, initially I was like, oh yeah, I'm gonna still be pumping iron. I would see all these I would see these moms like with big, huge, bellies, baby bumps, and they're like still squatting and stuff. But I was like, bro, I cannot, like, I just can't. I couldn't do that. And I was like, I would be silly to overwork my body. And I'm like, well, I've done it before. And I know my doctor was like, everything that you did before pregnancy, exercise wise, you can continue to do that. But for some reason, like the deadlifts and stuff, it just didn't really, I don't know, it didn't work for me. So I just stayed within what I was comfortable with and what my body, needed at the moment.
Definitely. Now, did you notice any physical changes that stuck? Like, did your hips like change shape after pregnancy permanently, or did you feel your body also start changing to the structure you had pre-pregnancy?
So it's interesting because I thought it would happen. So long story short, I'm starting to go back. My physique is kind of coming back to where it was. But for some reason, like the first maybe 2 months, I'm used to kind of like, like if you clean up your diet, after a couple of weeks with bodybuilding, you'll see a reaction pretty fast. Like if you're doing it the right way and being mindful and, eating those nutritious foods and moving your body. But for me, like by 2 months, I'm like, why is my tummy still kind of pudgy? Like what is happening? And I could start to see where everything else was going down, but I still would kind of have like a little pudge in my tummy every time I like ate certain things, or I don't know. I'm just like, I could take a sip of water and poof. I'm like, this is weird. So that took some adjusting to, some adjusting. But eventually now, like, okay, I'm starting to find more definition in my core. But I did experience a little diastasis recti, which is just when your abdominal muscles kind of separate in the middle. I didn't have a lot. I only had one finger with separation. Yeah, because I know some women can experience more. So that was like, okay, I have only 1 degree once I talked to my midwife. And then I'm like, I'll just, take it easy. Won't do many crunches because she said no, like hardcore crunches, and it'll go away. So I got my like 6 months checkup, and she's like, no, you still have 1 degree. It's going to take a little more time. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, I can't do any, ab workouts. I'm trying to get back chiseled for the summer. So she's like, sometimes it can take like up to a year. Like you have to think you carried a baby for 9 months, give your body at least that, So I did experience where, my legs and everything came down. I have a leaner upper body. So my delts and stuff started to kind of pop once I started to, incorporate those weights again. But for some reason, my tummy is giving me the blues. But I'm okay with that. Like, I'm just like, it's fine.
Yeah, it sounds like you have accepted it, but that doesn't mean you're not also wanting or working towards change.
Absolutely.
So you brought up something and I was like, oh, I need to touch on that. And that was that you would see other women like working out in a particular way and it just didn't work for you. Mm-hmm. Do you feel like comparison was an easier trap to fall into, or was it easier to actually turn away from it as opposed to competing, or is it not a problem at all for you?
Yeah, so a little bit of kind of not a problem at all, but initially, like I said, that my entire pregnancy journey was just an evolution, because by the end I was like, oh, I got this. Like I'll do this a million times more, like, but in the beginning, like I was nervous. It's something I never experienced. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like I'm thinking I'm going to be able to do my same, 5:30 a.m. cardio and then go back for a lift at night. Oh no, honey. At night and in the morning, I was like in the bed, sleeping like a log. And by like 2 p.m., I'm like crashing on the sofa, like, oh my gosh, why am I so tired? Like I haven't done anything. So I think I was more so comparing myself, to my old self. And I think that was kind of a moment where I had to say, like I said earlier, like you're doing something you've never done before. Like I would be silly to have the expectation to think that I can make 2 workouts a day, still eat within this calorie range. Like that's silly. I'm eating for 2 people, literally. So yes. I kind of made that comparison to my old self. And then also seeing what the industry, shows within fitness and then like motherhood. I'm like, oh wow, this lady's like squatting, still 100 plus, pounds. And I'm just like, I couldn't do that. And that was great for her, but that wasn't necessarily my story. And I had to accept that.
Yeah, I really think that's just a good note all around. No matter what journey you're on, it's like someone else might be going through something different or sharing
Mhm.
something different, but that doesn't mean that your story has to be that way too, or that you have to force yourself into their box.
Absolutely. 100%.
So, man, I'm like now debating, do I talk to you about your husband? Do I talk to you about the amazing things that you do with plant-based eating? Do I talk to you about your competing journey? What do you want to talk about next?
Yes. Well, let's just take a trip down memory lane. Let's talk about competing a little bit.
Okay, cool. So, you got into it in 2017, which was the same year you had become a vegan after 5 years of being vegetarian.
Mhm.
So, why don't you tell us what inspired you to go vegan and then what inspired you to step on stage?
Yeah. So my journey, I guess I'll start with stepping on stage because
Yeah.
I I initially transitioned to vegan like during the middle of a prep. I was
Oh.
like, yeah, no more. So, anyways, to step on stage, I was recently graduated from college, moved to Charlotte, North Carolina, and fitness and health had kind of always been an interest of mine. I danced, I ran track in like middle school. So I was always kind of active and had a certain body structure that, you know, I was like, oh, okay, like, these girls are pretty. Like I kind of have muscles too. I got picked on a lot actually for having muscles. Like it was so crazy how everything came full circle. And now I'm like prancing around with muscles, like as an adult,
Yeah.
winning competitions and traveling and meeting amazing people. So after just kind of experiencing, this is how my body structure is. Here's what I'm capable of. I found that bodybuilding was very concentrated and it was focused on, the muscles and, what you can do with your physique. And I was like, hey, I'm a young adult now. Like, I don't have to worry about like parents thinking I'm like, inappropriate or whatever the case may be. I'm out on my own. So I'm gonna try bodybuilding. Like everybody looks so beautiful and, all tanned up and sparkly and stuff. So I decided to I was at the gym working out one day, and this older guy, he was actually a IFBB Pro. He's like, "Hey, you should compete." I'm like, "Compete in what?" He's like, "Bodybuilding." I'm like, "Okay, what does that mean?" So me being me, I took it with a grain of salt, but I looked it up when we left the gym, and I saw NPC. And I'm like, "Oh, okay, NPC. This looks easy. Like I can totally do this." That was in maybe January. No, that was like December of 2016. And I'm like, okay, so New Year's coming. I'm gonna get ready. I'm gonna make a resolution. I'm gonna compete in a bodybuilding show. I had no coach. I had no idea what I was getting into. I think I like looked up a few YouTube videos at the time. Bianca Berry, which is another Black woman, she was like, kind of flourishing in the sport. So I'm like, okay, here's someone that looks like me, kind of giving me some ideas of what the sport was. And then I started to find like other people and just kind of seeing other athletes and people from all different walks of life. And it was just so cool to see like, wow, this is going to be a big thing. So I stuck to it after my New Year's resolution. In April 2017 is when I did my first show in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I had no idea what to expect. Like my bikini was just like terrible. Oh my God, it wasn't terrible, but like looking back, I'm like, why did I pick that color? Like, what was going on? I had no coach. So all I had did was just kind of like worked out and I knew what I wanted to look like. I just didn't know how to get there and how to, really flourish. But I eventually, like, I took the entire show. I won overall and novice overall, just the entire show. And I was like, oh, okay, like that was fun. I was like, oh, I don't miss, having a diet, but that was pretty fun. I'm gonna do it again. And then I went to a show in Atlanta 2 months later. So I met my coach there. She was in the audience and she saw, I guess, the potential on stage. And I didn't have a coach, so it wasn't like, she was like stealing me or kind of preying on me or anything. But she just like pulled me to the side after the show. She's like, you did amazing up there, but there were a few things that, I would change. I won the entire show in Atlanta as well in June of 2017, my second show. And she was like, some things I would change, like maybe your suit color, blah, blah, blah. But, do you have a coach or is anybody helping you? And I'm like, no. She like, okay, well, if you're interested, I have some capacity, I see that you look like a dedicated young lady, Instagram and things like that. We follow each other and just kind of kept communicating that way as well. And I was like, okay, like I trust her. So her name is Kanae Yancey, and she has a team of women that she coaches, and she just kind of gets the sport. She's an IFBB Pro too. So I went under her wing in June of 2017, and she prepped me for August 2017, which was going to be North Americans, and it was different from what I had been doing by myself. It was a lot tougher, but I got to North Americans and won, and I was like, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this. So yeah, like it happened so fast, like literally
Yes.
so fast. And in the midst of that, I had spoken with her about nutrition because I was vegetarian at the time, and I was like, okay, I'm pounding down a bunch of eggs every day, and the documentary What the Health had just came out on Netflix, and I was like binging Netflix one day during cardio, and I watched it, and I'm like, oh snap, like maybe I should just go completely vegan. So I brought it to her attention. I'm like, if this is the coach for me, she'll understand. And she was like, okay, like let's do it. Like that's nothing. Like I've worked with, I understand the vegan lifestyle. Actually, I was her only vegan competitor at the time. So she was like, we'll both get to learn through the process. Here's what I know. I went out, found information, studied articles, different things of that nature, figuring out which foods I should consume during prep so that I wouldn't be bloating, because sometimes the plant-based lifestyle can be kind of carb heavy, especially with the beans and stuff. So we worked together, and for my entire prep for North Americans, at 5-week prep, I did completely vegan, and we went to North Americans and won, that August in 2017.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's so cool. I mean, that's like a really quick road to pro,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to like what's, I guess, more normal.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to know what you felt contributed to your success.
Yeah. I think it was timing. I think that's key for competitors to understand is timing. Also not doing things before you're actually ready. I know we get so excited and, like, oh, just because it's a national show coming doesn't necessarily mean you have to jump in it. You want to present your best and be your best. But I think what really, contributed to the process was, really focusing in, like I said, timing. I ended up meeting my coach, which was super key because she knew what to look for, and what she knew was national level, quality. So just being, coachable, that's something. Being coachable really helped, get me to that point, because you need that second set of eyes. You need someone who understands the perspective of an athlete and, the perspective of a coach. And she knew the industry. So I think between the combination of timing and, being under the right leadership, as well as some of my personal characteristics as far as like being disciplined and, focused, those things kind of added up and it made sense for me. And that's what was aligned for me.
I love it. That's so cool. And I'm really impressed that you guided yourself in the beginning.
Yeah.
And you said the approach was very different when you got a coach. So what changed?
So I was a cardio bunny when I first started. I was like, oh, I need to make sure I'm running. I need to be able to sprint the fastest and the hardest. It's like, it's not a track meet, it's a bodybuilding competition. So that looked very different for me. She was like, when I met my coach, she's like, oh, you're really small. So we want to get you a little, bigger, or your muscles more full. That I remember her saying that. I'm like, what does that look like? And she's like, okay, well, it looks like, lifting strategically, making sure that you're eating before and after your workouts, things of that nature. We made sure, because I was very clear about I had kind of heard some horror stories. I was like, hey, I want to do, make sure I'm as natural as possible, keeping things as clean and to the point. And she was like, absolutely, 100%. Like, that's all she knew. Like, as far as no crazy supplementations, I did have protein and BCAA, some of the common stuff. So that's initially why when I first started, I held back, because I'm like, wait, I didn't know a lot. I'm like, I don't want to have to do like any steroids or anything, not knowing that like that's not normal. Like, it's sad that some people do that, but you can totally accomplish your goals without doing, harm to your body or doing illegal drugs and stuff. So that was different for me, where she helped me kind of understand, like, yeah, like you can, go about this situation as natural as possible, which is something that I ended up taking pride in. Like, I did this on a completely plant-based diet. Everybody's like, where are you going to get your protein from and stuff like that. I'm like, I get my protein in. Like, I'm okay. You didn't ask me that before. You found out I was vegan.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
That's so what's the right word to describe that? Because I've had many guests on this show, and they've expressed their pride in being natural, those who are comfortable talking about it. But they haven't described it in the way that you have. And you did it so confidently. So I want to know why you're choosing to be a natural athlete, especially now, honestly. Like, I'm a natural amateur athlete. I plan to remain natural, even if it means I don't go as far as others do. But it seems so prominent now. It seems like, and the way people describe being natural is so different, right? Like, some people will consider HRT to be natural. It's like, okay. And then other people will consider taking any supplement or vitamin as unnatural, which I disagree with, but it is something, out there. So tell me more about your perspective and why you decided to stay natural.
Yeah, so it was initially it's essentially it's an integrity thing. Like, it's, if you're doing anything, as far as anything that's going to speed up the process or kind of give you the cheat code or cheat route where you don't have to, do as much work, or, you can reach that muscle mass or whatever your goal is quicker. I don't feel like that's being integrous. And for the love of the sport and just who I am as a person, it was just kind of like, okay, I don't think I need that. I've made it through my entire life. I didn't want to do anything that would jeopardize my health in the long run, especially knowing that I wanted to have a family. And I think sometimes, those enhancements can do, harm in the long run from some of the horror stories I've heard. But I just wanted to, remain true to who I was before I became an athlete, and not make bodybuilding this obsession where I'm starting to change my morals and values. So for me, it was just like, okay, like I found a great plant-based protein that made it a little easier for me not to have to pack, tons of, tofu with me when I go to work or whatever, or it was just quicker. So that's why I went with the plant-based options. I found a brand, True Supplements, in which I'm still an athlete, and I work with them a lot. I found them. I love the ingredients. Like I said, it's the integrity within their brand and then their company that, I really value, and I see that they value in the fitness and health industry. So it's the integrity for me, like just remaining true.
And I'm glad that you shared your perspective on it, because we haven't had like many people delve into like their perspective as strongly. So I'm glad that you did. Have you ever been questioned about whether or not you're actually natural? Because I mean, you do have, I'm not questioning you because you are obviously really authentic, but I can imagine by looking at your physique, people would make the assumption that you're not.
Absolutely. And it's just like insane. It's like, honestly, like I don't have to lie to you about it. Like, not you, but when people would mention that, I'm like, I don't have to lie about anything that I do. Like, at the end of the day, like if bodybuilding just like elaborate, like just disappeared, then I still would be Breana. I would be who I was before I was a competitor. We all would just be humans interested in fitness. So I don't have to make up, stories and, try to prove anything to anyone other than the judges. And they only care about what I look like and how I'm progressing in the sport. So I did get a lot of, I wouldn't say a lot, but some people would question it. And even more so like, oh, I want to do the vegan diet. I want to, try plant-based. I'm like, okay, like, that's great. Here's what works for me. Here's how to do your research. Here's what you need to look into. And then it's just like, I kind of felt like they were waiting for me to say something more. And I'm like, that's it. That's the secret. Like, do what you're supposed to do, eat nutritious foods, move your body. And that's it. Like, I don't have any magic pills. No, I don't know anything that's going to make your muscles grow other than lifting in the proper way and making sure that you're fueling your muscles. So, it was just interesting to see that it was kind of like weird for some people to know. And some of the other vegan athletes that I know, I'm just like, like, people, I know that they're being honest, but some people still, say, oh no, that's not true about her. I'm like, literally, or him. I'm like, I know these people. I've seen them eat and I know them personally. So I'm like, don't try to assume certain things because you think it's not possible to be successful,
Yeah, a salient lesson across the board. Like, don't think something's impossible just because other people are doing it differently.
Absolutely.
Now, before you took, or actually, I'm sorry, after you took time off, the Ben Weider Natural Pro-Am show debuted. I believe it was 2019. Is that a show you want to do in the future?
Absolutely. And that was on my list to get rolling too. And it was 2019. Yes. And I want to say they were going to have 2 or something like that. And I that was on my list literally. And then the world started getting shut down. And next thing I know, I'm like pregnant. I'm like, oh, crud. So that's always going to be like one of my shows that I'm going to do that show one day.
Yeah, that would be super awesome. And
Yeah.
I think it's great that you own your process as well. And it's changed and evolved with your life circumstances or goals or coaching. Now, because you had a faster road to pro. Yeah. Is there anything you feel like you wish you would have done or experienced in the NPC that you didn't?
So I got a chance I did do one other national level show in Charleston, South Carolina. So I did a total of 2 amateurs and 1 national show before I went on to win my title at the 4th show. So I will say, like, I don't know, like, I got to meet so many amazing people that I feel like I kind of got the whole experience. I don't think that it is that my accomplishments are diminished because I got my pro status so quickly, because I still put in a lot of work. I still made a lot of sacrifices. So the time and longevity, I don't think should depict, like, oh, you ain't put in work or you didn't do 20 amateur shows before. So I think I feel like I got the whole experience. I met so many amazing people. I think that my physique, I would have loved to see it even evolve even more, because the way you get better is to continue to prep and to continue to compete. So I would have loved to like see like, wow, could I've like, really built my glutes up even more? Like, so just that would have given me an opportunity if I would have did more shows, of course, to do that. But other than that, I'm satisfied and I'm grateful, very grateful.
Yeah, that's amazing. And when you started competing in the pro circuit, you had done many of them back to back from March to September. And I was curious what you did between those shows to support yourself in staying ready and also improving for the next one.
Yeah. So at that point, it was a lifestyle for me. I'm trying to think of like my key differences between prep and kind of like, she would give me like a diet break, so to speak. But really some of those foods that I was eating in prep, like they were part of my daily routine, as a vegan athlete. So it wasn't much different. I did remember kind of resting a little bit more, because that's what was going to allow my glutes to kind of fill up so we can kind of continue to mold and stretch those and, things of that nature. So in between each of those shows, I would get like a small diet break, especially if the shows weren't like week after week. I would get like a small diet break, but like I said, I kept those foods the same, not indulging in, empty calories and things of that nature. And if so, like kind of doing everything reason. And it became a lifestyle. Like even to this day, I'm like, oh, I want cake. So I'm like, let me think of a way to bake a vegan cake with less sugar, but still obtain the same, flavor or, satisfy my craving. So it was a lifestyle for me, and it really nothing drastic, changed. I got to rest a little bit more, of course, because on those back-to-back shows, you kind of have to keep mashing the pedal. But in between, I was able to kind of take some time off and rest and recover and do some fun things. Like I remember doing like yoga for a workout and stuff, which is, not normal when you're on prep, because you got to make sure, you're hitting your workouts and stuff. So that was some of the main differences for me in between those shows.
Thank you for sharing that. That's really cool. I just love your passion and your commitment to your lifestyle so much. It's very clear that it's something you loved and love. With that said, is there anything you miss about being in the prep life?
Oh my gosh, yeah, it's just that feeling of satisfaction, like every day. Like I remember right now, I'm like struggling to get out of bed, like especially with like a 7-month old and having to like I breastfeed, so I'm like I have to feed her every couple of hours still, like. And I miss being able to get up at like 5:30, get in my zone. It's still dark and still outside. The house is still quiet. And I'm like lacing up to go get ready to do cardio and turn my music on. Like I can feel that experience that I used to have and how it really helped me so much mentally to kind of like have that time to myself. So now it's like, okay, like I'm barely making it out of bed. And then it's like, get baby ready, get self ready, go get ready for breakfast. And it's just like go, 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 go. When I feel like on prep, it was like concentrated, focused, like it's me versus me. I'm like hyping myself up in the mornings. Like, so I do miss that experience. And also just kind of like, I'm getting, excitement, especially in with hanging with my daughter, but even like the excitement of being in the gym and just, seeing those gains develop and, seeing how, much more you can stretch your body and, push yourself. So I miss kind of that part of it.
Yeah, no, that's understandable. And I feel like just the fact that you go through competing, you get pregnant, that's like already now an adjustment. And then you have a baby, that's like an even bigger adjustment. And so you have like the last memory of yourself was like competitor version. And then
Yes.
it's like, what do you do now? You're not, yeah, you're kind of grieving the competitor version of you while also like totally finding and embracing this new version.
Absolutely. And it's not to like be like, oh, I miss my old life. Cause I know I hear that a lot, like with other moms. Like, it's not that we miss our old life, it's just that we really enjoyed some of those things. But like, I love everything about my daughter. Like, I'm like, I only want to like hang out with her and stuff. So I'm like, I still get excitement and fulfillment from that too. So it's like finding that middle ground between who I used to be and who I am now and who I'll become.
Yeah, that's really cool. And like you said earlier, it all integrates and connects.
Mm-hmm.
So are your goals with competing similar or different now?
I think once I jump back in, I feel like once I'm back in prep, I'll be ready to like mash the gas. But right now I'm just like, oh, if I can just make it back on stage, that'll be my goal. Like no placement goals or anything like that. But I know how I am. Once I get ready to prep again, I'm like, oh, I want to make top 5 out the gate. Like to come back and see my baby girl in the audience and then like still pulling the numbers I used to pull, it's the placements and stuff. So right now I'm like, be modest, be gentle with yourself, be graceful. And as long as you can make it back to the stage, like that's a huge accomplishment. And then you can work from there. And then, eventually I want to go to the like I want my daughter to see me up there. I want to pick up where I left off and know that as long as my personality and my characteristics as who I am as a woman as long as those never change, then I still can achieve that same outcome that I always had, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like picking up where I left off.
Yes, I could see that happening too. Like you go back and you're in your zone and there's maybe even more motivation.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk about your relationship and how competing maybe impacted your relationship, if at all, because you met him in 2015. So was he living the fit lifestyle at that time too?
Absolutely. That's something that actually kind of helped bring us together and strengthen our relationship. Yeah. So he was in the military at the time, and my husband, like back then, he's so strong. Like I really admire him for that, like physically strong and mentally. He's just awesome. Definitely my other half. And I was just like blown away by like the fact that he like lifted weights. And I'm like, at that moment, like at the time in 2015, like I said, I was a cardio bunny up until I met my coach. I'm like, cardio gets it done. Like I want to be slim, I want to be trim. And I met him and he's like muscular and buff. I'm like, ooh, he cute. He look good. So then we like kind of merged our lives together. And I started like lifting. He started doing a little bit more cardio, and it just kind of allowed us time to spend together. He really motivated and encouraged me to compete. And me being me, I'm like, come on, let's do it together. But he's like all into the gains and stuff, and he's like pumping his heavy iron, and he's like, I gotta eat. So I want to eat. I want to be able to eat freely. And I'm like, you chicken. So so he eventually just was like, I'll cheer you on. I'll get up. I'll do your cardio with you. You know, we'll go to the gym together. But yeah, I don't think I want to compete. And I'm like, that's fine, whatever. But I'm like, when it's your turn, like, I got you. I'll prep all your food. I'll do everything for you. So he ended up just kind of being my I call him my manager. Like he's my man, my manager. Like he ended up being sort of like my manager, making sure like I'm at my shows and making sure I'm, got hotels, everything booked. So he was very, very instrumental in that. And it just flowed naturally. It wasn't any like, well, we don't spend time together, because we did spend time together, like prepping, food and going to the gym and hanging out, and at the shows we would get to travel together. So it didn't like tear us apart. It really made us stronger, and those are memories that we'll always have and that we're looking forward to like bringing out our daughter into as well. Like, yeah, let's pack up, get ready for mom's trip this week. She has a show here, blah blah blah, as a family now. So he's been very, very instrumental in my entire process.
That's really, really sweet.
Mm-hmm.
And was he deployed while you did say that you were prepping when he was deployed. So I did want to talk to you about this, because you've posted about communication and relationship development over the years, and how when he was deployed that put you guys in a position to learn more about how to communicate. So can you talk to us about what it was like to be with Daniel when he was deployed, and how your relationship has evolved over the years to suit each other?
Absolutely. So he ended up being deployed 6 months after we got married, which as newlyweds, I'm like, that was a lot in itself. We're newly married. I've only been married for 6 months, and then you're telling me you're packing up and you have to go for a year, to the Middle East. That's crazy. So me being who I am, and just kind of having a good relationship with him and seeing how he was my biggest cheerleader when it came to competing, I knew I had to be strong and be his cheerleader, when it came to being deployed, because neither one of us wanted it to happen, but it had to happen. And we knew that we were going to do everything we needed to do to get through it so that we could come out on the other side, and it would be helpful for our future family. And, throughout the deployment, we actually ended up building our first home here in Texas. So all while he was deployed, which took our communication level to another extreme, trying to articulate how we want things to be, virtually, and all of those good things. So we had to communicate, strongly there. Just me, I started, some days were easier than others, but I started to get a little bit emotional, just kind of missing him, because that was naturally going to happen, and just kind of talking through those, moments, and us both reassuring each other that, hey, like, we got this. At the end, we get a big house at the end, like, we get to see each other. And once it's over, we'll never have to do this again, because we knew, he will be, finishing his term contract once he was back. So I really just had to, like, focus in, like, kind of like prep, like each day, as each day went on, we got the chance to talk every day, but I knew that was one day closer, kind of like the countdown to getting on the stage. Like, I know it was one day closer to him being back home, so if I just focus, I filled my time, I filled my calendars up with things to do. Like, I probably worked my family members' nerves and my friends' nerves, because I'm just like, what everybody doing? Like, I had nothing to do. So, because he was gone. So I just filled my time and made sure that, we communicated our love for each other and our support. And I knew that me telling him, like, oh my gosh, I wish you were home, that wouldn't help him. That wouldn't bring him home any faster. So just really communicating and helping each other understand what our goal was and how it'll impact our future. So we got to stick to it.
Yes, that's a really positive way of looking at it, like looking into the future and seeing what you're working towards, rather than the challenges of working towards them.
Absolutely. And it's just like prep, literally.
Yeah. Yes, and enjoying it along the way. Like, it sounds like you guys enjoyed that process more because of it.
Yep, absolutely.
Are there things you wish you knew about being a military spouse before you became one?
Ooh, yes. I'm the type of person, because, like, when I think about life, or I think about work or school, and it's very different when you're in the military, especially for my husband. He has, like, a lot of integrity, and that's something that he's, really helped me understand is one of our family values. Like, if you say you're going to do something, you do it, and you be there on time. Actually, be there early. Not even on time. Like, you make sure that, you listen, and that you represent, yourself well. And that's what I see so much of him in the military. So sometimes he would get, like, calls to report, if there was a hurricane or something, because he was in the National Guard. He'll, like, have to pack up and literally be ready to head out a couple hours later. I'm just like, just tell them you're not coming. And he's like, wait, you can't do that in the military. Like, if it was work or school, you can just be like, hey, I'm not gonna make it today. Like, he's like, no, like, I signed up for this, like, I have to be there. And in my head, I'm like, this sucks. So I wish I would have known that. I'm like, it's a no-brainer, because it's like, it's the military, that's a big deal. But in my head, I'm like, just tell them you can't come. Tell them who's gonna protect your wife from the hurricane,
Yeah, exactly. You're like, excuse me.
Right. That was, like, one of the crucial conversations we had to have, and he really helped me understand that. And for that, I get it now. I'm like, you're right. You signed up to serve and protect. And where would we be if all of the service members, wives were like, no, you can't go? Like, that wouldn't help anybody.
Yeah, that's true. It's a sacrifice. You are, like, the saying, freedom is not free. It's on behalf of not just those who go and serve bravely and selflessly, but it's also on behalf of the families who
absolutely
send them off.
Yep. So that's something I wish I would have known. Like, this is gonna be real deal.
You're like, so that's an adjustment I'll have to make.
Absolutely. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. Fine, you can chase your dreams, it's okay. Well, that's really special. I'm glad you shared that and you were willing to talk about it.
Absolutely.
I think there's probably people listening who maybe can relate or have wondered about it or have curiosity. So it's a topic I don't know that has been covered too much on the show. So I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah.
We were talking about your commitment to being vegan, and we haven't really gotten into your passion for cooking and releasing recipes and ebooks and blogs, and maybe you can, and your lifestyle boutique. So can you just tell us more about all these things you're passionate about and you're working towards?
Absolutely. So I'm happy you brought those up. Like I get so excited when I get to talk about the things that, I love and enjoy. So for me, that's a little I got something to say. So for me, with the recipe development, it just kind of came out of nowhere. It just dawned on me like, hey, I still want to eat some of those foods that I was raised on and that I love, but I want to do so vegan. And I want to inspire other people to know like, hey, there's other options out there. If you're interested, you don't have to feel like you have to miss out on certain things that you're used to, some of those traditional foods. So I took it upon myself after, Food Network has always kind of been like something I've done to pass time. Like it's so bad that I will watch Food Network like before a show, like before the show started. I'm like in the room with my feet propped up watching Food Network because it's just something I love. And I get to learn from there. And I'm like, oh, I know how to make that vegan. Or I wonder would I be able to switch out this ingredient for, that ingredient. And I started just doing it naturally. And the food was coming out great. My husband loved it. I got a lot of great food feedback and everybody just loved it. And I'm like, okay, like this makes sense. Like it works for me. Like I understand. I have an eye for things, a palate for things. So just keep doing it. And I eventually started to write those recipes out and I wanted to present them to other people. So now I have them available on my website, officialbrewigley.com, and you can download as many recipes as you like, just for a small price, like $1 or $2, to cover the cost of, creating the content. But I don't know, it just kind of naturally started to happen. And now I'm just like, I have like, a really cool recipe gallery full of recipes that I've created, I've tried, I love, other people have tried and love. So that's something that, I really enjoy, that recipe development piece of the vegan lifestyle.
That's so cool. So you'd get inspired by seeing, I don't know, the term regular maybe isn't appropriate, but like regular meals.
Yeah.
And say, okay, I'm going to make it vegan. And that was like really something you enjoyed doing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's it's so cool to see just kind of how it's possible. And that's always something I wanted to share with other people. Like, it's possible to do or create meals, completely vegan.
Yes. And I think it's really cool. I'm not vegan, but I just think I enjoy vegan food, but I just find it really cool when people are able to get creative in the kitchen that way, and make things that are really just delicious and make you feel good. And I think it's so cool that you turned it into a passion and you've released recipes, you've released ebooks, and you help people with their nutrition because of this. So then you also have on your website the lifestyle boutique. So which I remember reading, it was like you started to inspire others to not let the world define who they are.
Yes, that's my baby. That was my quarantine project, like when the world shut down. Yes, when the world shut down in 2020, I was just like home. My husband was still deployed. I'm like, I want to do something. Like I've always had the entrepreneurial mindset. Although I do work in corporate America, it's still naturally within me, just like from childhood and just seeing my parents and my father, and he was an entrepreneur and successful. So there's something I always wanted to do. I'm like, okay, like, but I want it to be fun. I don't want it to feel like work. And I came up with the idea of the lifestyle boutique. I didn't want to just focus on like one product or one kind of item. I was like, I want it to be like lifestyle, like everything that I use in my daily life or that I would love to have. So whether it was like, I love cutlery and I love kitchen appliances because I'm always in the kitchen, and I love pots and pans and dishes and plates. So I'm like, oh, if I find unique items like that, then I can create those as offerings, for women who, like type of things that I like, or individuals who like the type of things that I like. So I started the boutique and I have so many different things on there, from like cute little jewelry, cute little bracelets, silverware. I love like coconut shaped bowls, like natural coconut bowls, plates and forks, just a lot of different things. At one point it was like, oh, this is a lot, but that's kind of the things that I love. I love books. I had a journal on there, a purse, a makeup bag. So anything that I find that I love, that's what I include in my boutique.
That's so cool.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing that you were able to do that during the pandemic and find more ways to channel your creativity and the things that you enjoy. Now you mentioned you work in corporate America. What is it that you do?
Yes, so I work in the financial industry for which I can say I work for Wells Fargo as a global product manager.
Oh.
I started this role out of college in 2015 and it's just evolved from there. I work with a digital product that we present to corporate businesses, kind of like your Campbell's, your Targets, different things like that. So these online payment options, and I support that product.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I bank with Wells Fargo, so
Have you?
one of my many banks, but yes.
Right. Same girl.
I won't tell you. Oh wait. So that's really cool. I think it's just great to hear what people do. I think outside of the life things and the passion things, like it's a good reminder that that there's more going on. So thank you for telling us that, and thank you for sharing about your passions with the lifestyle boutique. And I've wanted to ask this question. It might be a unexpected question.
Yeah.
So just warning. But because you started it to not let the world define who other people are, who your customer is, how did you find yourself?
I just had to stay true to who I know that I am, who I was raised, how I was raised. My mom and dad affirmed me a lot. I was taught that everything I touch turns to gold. And I remember my mom wrote that in my birthday card, and I still have all of my birthday cards. And I just like had to remember, like, if I decide in my mind and heart that I'm going to do something, and if I give it my all, then it'll be successful. And I had to make room for when I fail and when things don't go as planned. And I had to realize that, hey, that's maybe how it was going to happen. So I'm a big believer in myself. I know what I'm capable of. I know what I've accomplished. I know what I want to accomplish. And I just know that there are other people out there like me, who believe in themselves too. And there are some people who should believe in themselves because we all are super creative and powerful people. So that's how I just found myself. I just have to stay true to who I know I was raised to be.
That's really good. It's like finding yourself was less about looking for some way to define you. It was more about knowing who you were.
Absolutely. Yes. And knowing that things would mold around. If I stayed true to who I was, then things would fit around me. And the things that stick and the things that I've accomplished are what was supposed to be. The people who are still around, the man that I, was thankful enough to marry, like that's who I was supposed to marry. My daughter, competing, my coach, like everything that's come my way and that has created success for me, that was all supposed to happen because I remained true to who I was.
You have strong faith?
Absolutely. That's the biggest thing for me. I'm a believer in Christ, and I know, I always make room. I tell people I make room for God to work. I know what I want to do. I know my plans, but I make room for him. And knowing that everything will go as planned, not being too hard or too focused on something, but just doing my part and letting him do the rest.
That's really cool.
Yes. Thank you for asking that. Like, just having this conversation is just striking so much fire within me again.
Oh, that's so cool to hear. That makes me so happy.
Yes.
Well, it equally sparks fire in me just hearing your passion. And I'm just hearing you even say that makes me really happy, like I said, and it gets me excited about my day. I find these conversations
Oh,
usually do make me feel like, oh yeah, we do all have a purpose, and you specifically are just so empowering, and I've loved learning about you and your story. And I always like to wrap up the podcast by asking for your best advice for people who have never competed before but would like to, as well as your best advice for the athletes on their road to pro.
absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. Let me think. I'll address the individuals who are interested in competing. To know that it's not gonna always be about your physical growth and your physical development, but a lot of competing is mental, and where your mind is and where your energy goes, your body is gonna follow. So, really focusing in and understanding, what your goal is and how you'll reach that is important to your success in this sport. You have to stay focused. You have to stay, on track with what you said you'll do and how you'll do it. No kind of, nobody's going to do the work for you. Your coach can't get up and do your cardio for you. I wish, but that's not how that works. So just knowing that, you're responsible for your outcome, I think it's very important. And it's just a mental evolution that you'll experience when competing.
I love that advice. And,
Yes.
and what about those on their road to pro?
Ooh, to stay the course. Like, everybody's journey looks different. Sometimes it'll take months, sometimes it'll take years, but stay the course, and know what's for you won't miss you. And I think when we fall in love with the process, the end result isn't as overwhelming or as crucial for us. So, what's for you is for you, and it won't miss you. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I just have appreciated so much of your advice and insight and experiences. And I know for sure other people are going to appreciate it too. And I'd love if you could share how people can find and connect with you, and maybe reiterate your website as well.
Absolutely. Yes. So, of course, my website is officialbrewigley.com, and that's BRE Wigley, Wigley. I have all of my info on there, all of my recipes. The boutique is also on my site as well. Information about my background as well. On there, my Instagram, I have 2 accounts, one foodie account and one kind of lifestyle and everyday things. One of my accounts is at Bree, BRE.faith.fit. You can see my day-to-day on there and my cute little baby. And then my vegan food page, which has all the details, all the things that we love to eat, how I like to make them, and tips and tidbits on vegan. You can find me at vegan.bree on Instagram. So those are my main 2 ways to reach me. I'm active in my DMs. I love to chat with other people and answer questions and get to know my followers.
Oh, that's so amazing. And I'm going to definitely share everything in the show notes. You guys, that's always on celestial.fit/podcast. If you are feeling inspired to leave a rating or review, that would be amazing. You guys can do that on whatever platform you're listening on. That always goes a long way. But what goes even further is when you guys show love on social media or share this with your friends, and let the athletes know, slide into Bree's DMs, tell us what you loved about this. Because I know it usually means a lot to them, and it means a lot to me when you guys take the time to reach out or share or leave reviews. So really, really appreciate you guys tuning in again. And Bree, thank you so much for coming on.
Yes, thank you for having me, and thanks for having my little baby. I know she was
Oh, of course. So she was the star. She's a like special guest.
right. I appreciate you so much, and thank you for all you're doing for the industry and this platform. You're
Aw,
incredible.
thank
Like, you're
you.
rocking it, girl.
Oh my God. Thank you so much. That was so nice of you to say.
It's
Seriously.
welcome.
Well, I hope you all have an amazing rest of your day, night, or morning, wherever you are in the world while you're listening to this episode.